All right. How do you plan to grow their economic assets and create shared sustainable prosperity in Minneapolis for all?
Well, my main I think I need that I want to see happen, and it probably has to happen on a national level, and that's a basic income guarantee. I want to see everybody get enough money to get them out of poverty. That was the idea that was put forward by Dr. Martin Luther King, and back in actually the 1700s, one of our founding fathers, Thomas Paine, also advocated this idea, and it's been advocated by very liberal economists, very conservative economists. And basically, we want to cut out the welfare bureaucracy and just write out checks to people to bring them up to the poverty level. Now, if you want to work beyond that, you can do that too, and without it counting against your basic income guarantee. And of course, this will stimulate the economy. It'll raise wages for everybody, even for working people, because people will not be desperate to find a job because they can survive without one if they have to. And as we are finding with computers, robots, technology, there just simply aren't enough jobs to go around. I mean, these robots and now with artificial intelligence, these machines can do the job of not just one person, but 10 or 20 people. So that we have to find other ways to provide for people besides everybody having at least a full-time job. But again, that probably has to happen on a national level, but we could do a partial basic income guarantee on a local level. And also we can lobby the federal government to provide, to begin a pilot project in Minneapolis, a basic income pilot project to see how it works before it's expanded to other areas of the country. But on a local level, what we could do is we could form collective businesses and cooperative housing for unemployed, underemployed, homeless, and underhoused individuals. We could provide, for example, a lot of the people I've been working with, homeless people and poor people, off and on for 40 years, and many of them have skills in carpentry and plumbing and electrical. So let's put them to work, let's say, building sheds. You can sell the sheds, but also these sheds can be turned into tiny houses. If you turn them into tiny houses with plumbing and electrical, you can live in them. We'd have to have some zoning changes in Minneapolis to accommodate them, but that's one way that we could not only increase people's income, but dramatically decrease their cost of living, because you probably can live for about half, by living communally, you probably live for about half of what you would living as a single individual. That's why a family of four is at a poverty level of 24,000, where a single individual is about 12,000. Because four people can live for about twice, not four times as much, but about twice as much as a single individual. So, so again, I think that these collective businesses would be one way to provide for the increasing number of homeless people, unemployed people, and poor people in our city.
Okay. The second question you kind of just answered. It was what are your plans to prepare the workforce in Minneapolis for the jobs of the future, keeping in mind the diversity of educational attainment by ethnic group.
Yeah.
So you kind of addressed
Well,
that.
I did have some other things to say about that as well. Now, of course, the mayor, many people don't know, but the mayor does not have much to do with education. We have a elected school board that makes decisions about education, but the mayor and the city council can do things to really improve the environment for students. For example, we can make sure that all of our students have adequate nutrition, adequate food, adequate housing, have stable family relationships. And there's things that that a mayor and city council can have a dramatic effect on all those things. So would be my main goal as a mayor, would be to stabilize these families, to make sure that that everybody had enough, all the students had enough food and adequate housing and stable families.
Okay. What are your specific plans to ensure our youth in Minneapolis graduate in high quality schools and higher education institutions and find jobs paying at least a living wage?
Well, again, the mayor doesn't have a lot to say about how the schools are run. That is the school board. But there are things that the city council and the mayor can do to ensure that people can find jobs once they get educated, or once they are old enough to join the workforce. One of the problems we have right now nationwide, and we're going to have increasing in Minneapolis with the increase in the minimum wage, is that young people will not be able to get jobs, entry-level jobs, and therefore they'll be denied the benefits that middle-class children have when their families can afford to support them and work for free. They're completely supported by their families, while they go off and do completely unpaid internships. That's completely legal, and they get their chance to get their foot in the door, so they have a chance to make $20, $30, $40 an hour later on. Poor children, the parents cannot afford to support them completely while they do these unpaid internships, but poor parents could allow their children to stay at home. They could afford to keep their children at home, and that would cut down and actually eliminate the rent. So the child, the student then could, or the worker then could probably make it on $7.50 an hour, $9 an hour, but they wouldn't have to have the full $15 an hour right away. But that way they get a chance to get their foot in the door, and where they can make some really good money later on.
What strategies do you offer to grow the economic assets of the working poor in Minneapolis, keeping in mind the differences by ethnic group?
Well, I mentioned that nationally what has happened is this basic income guarantee, and again, we can do a partial basic income guarantee. We can certainly subsidize workers if we want to have people make the minimum wage. We can subsidize workers. It'd be much more efficient, much better to do that than to impose that burden on employers and make them have to decide between hiring better educated, better trained workers rather than less well trained, less well educated workers. So we have to make sure that all workers, even people with disabilities, people with a criminal record, people without even without a high school education, can get jobs, even if they're not making a full $15 an hour, at least they're getting their foot in the door, they're getting some training, they're getting on-the-job training here. That's valuable. It's a valuable asset. Ask anybody, any student, a middle-class student who's doing a completely unpaid internship. They would probably pay. Some of them would pay for that opportunity, and poor people's children need that opportunity as well.
The next section is environmental sustainability. The question is, what specific strategies or policies would you work for in our city to increase public and or private investments in our city for compact development, energy efficient buildings, solar electricity, transit, bikes, EVs, and climate resilience?
Okay, well, one thing I would do is I would experiment with eliminating private automobiles on some city streets. I like the idea of Nicollet Mall, where it has no private automobiles. I would expand that to start with. I would expand that to Marquette Avenue, and if it worked, if it was good for business, and if the residents liked it and the shoppers liked it, I might expand it further. I might have it include the whole downtown, maybe more of the central city, even a larger space than downtown Minneapolis. This would go a long ways. Well, first of all, it would provide a strong incentive for people to use public transportation, and to the extent that we use public transportation, we're going to cut down on our carbon emissions. And to the extent that we use public transportation, we're going to have economies of scale. Right now, transportation is expensive because a lot of the buses are riding empty sometimes. But if we can have 5-minute wait times, a friend of mine, his name is Bob Carney Jr., he's advocating that we have 5-minute wait times between buses, and have the buses run on a much finer grid. And that way, with a 5-minute wait time, you don't have to have a schedule. You just look down the street, you see a bus coming. And he's suggesting metro mobility sized buses because you don't need as large of a bus to accommodate as many people if you're having more stops and if you have a more frequent schedule. Also, I would eliminate the Southwest Light Rail because the cost is just way too high, and buses are more efficient cost-wise, and also you can't move a rail. You can move a bus route, but much more difficult, impossible probably, to move a rail. And light rail is oftentimes built around the needs of developers, built around the needs of property owners rather than the needs of people that need to get from point A to point B. So let's have transportation that's built around the needs of people rather than for profit. I'll get some more to say about that too.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, I think that we should have experiment with building underground. Warehouses certainly can be built underground. Some factories could be built underground. Atlanta has whole shopping malls built underground, and many other areas of the world do too. The ground stays relatively constant temperature, just a few feet below the surface, and it's pretty close to much closer to room temperature in the wintertime and closer to a comfortable temperature in the summertime. So you eliminate the cooling expenses, eliminate the heating expenses, and that will go a long ways towards reducing the carbon emissions as well. So these are some of the things I would do, and I think the climate change is the most important issue facing our planet. So while the mayor cannot do a lot about reducing, eliminating climate change worldwide, we can certainly do our share here in Minneapolis.
Okay. This section is growing neighborhoods and clusters. Which are the high poverty neighborhoods in Minneapolis, and what specific strategies would you implement to grow economic assets in those neighborhoods?
Well, I know that North Minneapolis is an area that has been poverty-stricken for many years. South Minneapolis, where I live in Powderhorn, and that also has a high proportion of poverty. And poverty seems to go along with neighborhoods that are made up predominantly of people of color. And that's the situation in North Minneapolis, and that's the situation in my neighborhood. So, I think we have to give priority to people of color. We have to give priority to, especially to African Americans, to Native Americans, to Latinos, not only because they have the greatest need, but because of the history we've had with these populations, where they've been exploited and for reasons I don't need to go into. I'm sure everybody knows most of the details here. But in order to help to make up, we can never entirely make it up, but in order to help make that up, we can prioritize these collective business I was talking about, these cooperative housing ventures in poor neighborhoods, in North Minneapolis and in South Minneapolis where I live. And I don't know if I've talked about it yet, but I'm advocating that we have. Did I ever talk about the collective businesses and cooperative housing in this? No, okay. So yeah, that's one of my solutions to making sure that we don't have clusters of poverty. Instead, we have clusters of prosperity.
Okay. Speaking of those business clusters, it says current data suggests that metals and machinery, medical devices, publishing and printing, and computing and software are some of the industries in Minneapolis. What specific policies would you offer to grow these clusters, develop new ones, and connect the Minneapolis workforce to jobs in those clusters?
Well, I think we have to have more job training, and that training, a lot of that training can be workers, people with skills, training people that don't have the skills. And then I want to see on-the-job training. I want to see people forming businesses around the skills that they have, the skills that they want to learn. As I mentioned, I think these should be for people that want them. They should be collective businesses where they can have a chance of owning the businesses themselves. I think you should be tied to housing. With the collective businesses, we have a chance of increasing the income of otherwise low-paid, unemployed, or homeless people. But we also, by using the cooperative housing, collective housing, co-housing model, we can cut the living expenses dramatically.
That covered it.
All right.
All right.